events on open source software, which embraces the idea of growing and learning together. Welcome to the first session of the event. Before we start, let's see what are we going to do for a couple of days from now.
Good morning, everyone. So, let's know what is open source and why is open source. Open source refers to source code that is publicly accessible and allows anyone to inspect, modify, or learn from it. Open source projects encourage collaboration and the freedom to use the software for any purpose you wish. Why do we prefer open source? So, these are the main reasons why we open source more likely. First point is that shift developers from low value work to high value work. Like when it comes to coding or open source, like small problems like blogging content and operating systems all are being already solved and resolved. While developers could spend their time reinventing projects that the source community have already perfected. Like it is preferable to use the world's best projects, especially when that project comes at no cost to you. This helps developers to get new challenges which they haven't worked till now. The next thing is that lower total cost of ownership. Like when it comes to closed software, like closed source softwares, the licensing it costs more when it comes to open source softwares. Adopting open source software generally has a lower upfront cost because the software often comes at no cost or relatively low cost. And the shift from cost center from licensing to customization and implementation. Additional costs like training, maintenance, and support are sunk costs. The next thing is that given enough eyeballs or bugs are shallow. Okay, for example, you just take a closed source software. If there is any bug issues or vulnerability, we have to wait until the developers of that particular company or organization comes and conduct a meeting so that we can find the vulnerability and we can solve it. But when it comes to an open source software, we ourselves can find the bugs without anyone's help as the source code is provided to us so that we can fix it by ourselves. Let's have an intro to Hacktoberfest. And for those who doesn't know what Hacktoberfest is all about, first register at hacktoberfest.digitalocean.com. Then submit at least 4 pull requests to any public GitHub repository that is classified with the Hacktober topic or has a Hacktober accepted label on it. You can look for open issues labeled Hacktoberfest for inspiration. Quality contributions are encouraged. Create issues or classify existing issues on your GitHub projects with Hacktoberfest to help let new contributors know what to work on. For those who are giving pull requests, you can also tag any spam or irrelevant pull requests with the invalid label to disqualify them and thus maintaining the standard of the event. For those who doesn't know what a pull request is, like pull requests are proposed code changes you can submit to a branch in a repository on GitHub. Like once submitted, a project maintainer or the one who are looking after the code will review and discuss the changes before they become final. Lately, in this session itself, we can see hands-on the session later. And next, what is a valid pull request and what type of pull requests leads to spamming and thereby disqualification? The first thing is that pull requests can be given by anyone, and we can't just encourage spamming the whole thing because pull requests that are automated, scripted opening pull requests to remove white space, optimize images, etc. Spammy pull requests can be given a label that contains the word invalid or spam to discount them. Maintainers are faced with majority of spam that occurs during Hacktoberfest, and we dislike spam just as much as you. If you are a maintainer, please label any spam pull request submitted to the repositories you maintain as well as invalid or spam and close them. Pull requests with this label won't count toward Hacktoberfest. So that's all from our side as an introduction to Hacktoberfest. So we
Thank
can.
Yeah, thank you, Alfie. So let's move on to the first session, Journey with Open Source by Mr. Joel Wasserman. He is the creator of Flossbank, which provides a free and frictionless way to support open source maintainers across the entire dependency tree of your installed packages. He is an active member of the community and has been working in Google for the past 2 years. He is also the director of the Teacher Fund, an organization which works to make public school teaching a more desirable career path through supporting and funding. It's a great honor for all of us to have such an eminent person as our speaker. He'll join us very soon. Thank you all for your patience.
Hi, everybody. Can somebody let me know if they can hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Awesome. I'm going to try to share my screen, so I hope things go well. Give me 1 second. Okay. Let's.
Yes, sir, it's visible. Yeah,
okay.
it's visible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, like you all are aware, my name is Joel Wasserman. I work at Flossbank. I also work at Google. Here's my GitHub link. Here's my Twitter. You can follow me. I talk a lot about open source. I talk a lot about tech in general. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Hacktoberfest is definitely my favorite holiday. So yeah, let's kick it off. So first, I'll go over what we'll cover. I'm going to start out with, I know we have people from different backgrounds, so I'm going to start out with talking about briefly what is open source. Then I'll go into what is Git and GitHub pretty briefly, and then why you all should get involved in open source. I'll talk a little bit about Hacktoberfest and then Flossbank and kind of my own experiences. And then at the very end, I'll do a demo on how to submit a PR to open source. Specifically, what was mentioned earlier was I work on Teacher Fund. So we're going to actually submit a PR to the Teacher Fund repository. Okay, so what is open source? I know most of you or some of you are well aware what open source is, but I'll briefly cover it because it makes me just super excited. I love open source so much. The term open source generally refers to something that people can modify and share, and it's designed to be publicly accessible. So it's generally free. People can modify and share it. It is extremely transparent. The term originally came from a software development design that focused on collaboration. It has more of a community-oriented mindset. To be clear, I want to emphasize this early, and I'll touch back on this a few more times, but open source isn't actually just code. And you heard me mention earlier this sense of community. Open source can be designs, it can be graphic designs, it can be documentation, it can be tutorials, it can be issues. If you're participating in the community at all, you are part of open source. So some people think they need to make these big dramatic changes to a code base to become an open source maintainer. But even if you're creating an issue or commenting on an issue, that's really valuable to the ecosystem. So I want to encourage people to do that. Oftentimes when I think about open source, I think about little Lego pieces, little pieces like this. Each Lego piece is a piece of software that somebody built or a group of people built it. And oftentimes those developers use Git and GitHub to put that piece of code out into the world so other people can use that Lego. And they do this by packaging it up into what's referred to as a package, an open source package. When I think about open source, I think about each open source package as a Lego block. And to take that analogy a little bit further, the open source ecosystem really is just a bunch of these Lego pieces. Effectively, brilliant developers all over the world did really interesting and unique things and published those things to the open source repositories and open source package managers and package distros. And it's really cool. Brilliant people can write things from all over the world, and anyone else can use that code and write even more code on top of it, kind of using it to just build their own thing. And much like Lego pieces aren't really that unique or interesting on their own. Oftentimes packages are the same way, but you can still make something really, really incredible with an assortment of these most amazing Lego pieces. That's really cool. Each time I pull in an open source package when I'm working on a project for myself, I realize that I'm actually relying on the work of hundreds, if not thousands of other developers around the world that have contributed. Sometimes I wonder why people aren't freaking out about how cool open source is, like why there's not mayhem in the streets. And I wonder if I told them that open source is like sitting in your living room and being able to reach out and teleport any tool or material into your living room. Just reach out and just teleport it just into your living room. And then being able to build whatever you can imagine. That feels like what open source feels like to me with respect to the tech world. That's how much power it has.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you, sir. It would be great if you can turn on your webcam.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank you, sir.
Let me try to do that. Where is my webcam? There it is. Okay. Can you all see me?
Just a moment, sir. I think it's taking a bit of time. Yes, sir, you're visible now.
Oh, I am. Okay, great. Am I still visible?
No, not now. It was visible for a moment and then it went. Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Can you all still see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So now I want to touch on how open source software is used. We're kind of giving just, again, a brief introduction into open source. Open source software is used just like Lego pieces. It's used by almost every Fortune 500 company. It's used by hackers. It's used by Google. It's used by space companies. It's used by even just hobbyists, just doing something for fun. Open source software is essentially the backbone of technological progress in the 24th century, which is really, really, really cool. And in fact, the core principle that anyone can use open source software is really what empowers all these different communities to be able to use it. Anybody can use these packages. That's a core principle. And what that's enabled is just amazing technological progress. So now I'm going to give just two brief examples. So you all might be aware of a company called Facebook, I'm sure. They have some big open source packages. The Facebook React Native open source package that allows you to do mobile development on both iOS and Android, writing JavaScript. It's really, really cool. You all should definitely check it out if you haven't heard about React Native. Anyway, it has hundreds of thousands of lines of code. That's an example of an open source package. It has about 30 dependencies. It's worth noting that even though React seems like this really, really big package, they actually still chose to depend on other people's work. So I think another core principle of open source is understanding that I don't actually have to reproduce everything. If somebody else does this really well, or there's another package or group of maintainers that do something really well, I can actually just pull that in as a dependency. Even Facebook's React Native does that. Open source is small packages. So I also don't know if you all have heard of this, but there's a NPM package called Is Even. Is Even is about 6 lines of code, and it returns whether a number is even. It's a really popular package. And as a matter of fact, it's really cool. Others might say, well, I can save 1 minute of work and maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 lines of code every single time I use this, and they can actually find value in this really tiny package. So this just goes to show that even if you have something that is 2 or 3 lines, it could still provide immense value to the ecosystem. And that third bullet is literally just what the code is. It's just returning whether a number is even or not. And I'll touch briefly on Git and then GitHub. So Git is a distributed version control system for tracking changes in source code during software development. It can also be used to track any other type of files. It doesn't have to be coding files. It can be design files. It can be Word documents. You'll notice on this slide that I don't use the word open source. That's because Git actually doesn't imply open source. Someone can be using Git and their package could not be an open source package. Oftentimes, open source does use Git. So if you're an open source developer, you will learn and should know Git because it's something that you will use. But but Git does not imply open source. Okay. So you probably are wondering, what is GitHub? GitHub is effectively just a UI for source code management. So it's built on Git, that version control system we just mentioned. It can also be used as a discovery tool for open source packages. And most importantly, it's used for collaboration and community in the open source community. GitHub is where you go and you post your code, you push your code up to GitHub. Not only does it version control for you, but now anyone else can see your code. They can file issues. You can collaborate together, and effectively, and you can allow other people to fork that repository, which we'll do later. So GitHub has kind of been this catalyst to the open source ecosystem that really has allowed far more people than previously to start development. Here's a screenshot of the UI. This is a FOSS repository we have, and just briefly, almost all your time will be spent in the first 3 tabs you see at the top of the page, the code, issues, and pull requests. And just to touch back on what I said earlier, I want to make it very clear that when you're contributing to open source, you don't have to be writing code. If you spend all your time in the issues tab of GitHub, commenting or even creating issues, you're helping the open source ecosystem. All right, now the good part, why you all should get involved in open source. So most importantly, open source needs you. Open source is built of engineers from all over the world working on unique things, and having a diverse perspective in every way, shape, or form is extremely important. It makes the code better. I'm sure recently you might have seen that Twitter has an algorithm that is just blatantly incorrect and problematic. And if their code was open source, I'm sure that problem would have been caught way earlier than when it was in production. So having code in open source and maintainers in open source is really, really important to come from all walks of life. So having you in open source is incredibly valuable. During your path in open source, you'll probably start by learning. At some point, you will probably consume open source code, and then you might find yourself contributing to open source code, and then you'll be building things on your own. When I first mentioned learning, I want to bring up this. It's become pretty recently popular. It's called learning in public. And learning in public might be something that you're a little bit shy about, or you watch tutorials online. Sometimes I find myself watching egghead tutorials, and it feels like they program so fast. It feels like I can never keep up. They're like using editing to make the video look smoother. And you have to remember that those are edited videos. That's not actually how people learn to code. So I have to remind myself that, and I really appreciate when other people learn in public, when they post their learnings and they work through things online, because it helps me realize or reminds myself that actually everybody learns at a similar pace. Nobody's learning these things extremely fast. So you might witness other people in the open source ecosystem learning something in public, and you can take it as an opportunity to learn along with them. And maybe if you choose to learn in public, you'll find that others take that opportunity to learn with you. It's really, really cool. I love that aspect of kind of open source development. After learning, you might find yourself consuming some open source software. And how do you consume open source software? Well, it's generally consumed through package managers. So you would use NPM or Yarn or pip or Maven, depending on the language. and you would install an open source package. Now that package was probably published by someone else in the world, but you pull it in your package into your project because you think that it will add value. When you install an open source package, your project takes note of that installation so that later on, when it's hosted in GitHub and somebody else forks it or somebody else clones that repository, they would then install all the packages defined in your package.json or your whatever the project took note of it in, the kind of the blueprint of the project. Sometimes for Python, it's called requirements.txt. You can search through a package manager like npm.js to find packages. Maybe if you want to find a package that does one specific thing, like I want to run code on both Android and iPhone. You can Google it, or you can actually search in package managers to see if people have included that in their README and find other packages that do it besides just React Native. If there's something you don't know how to do, chances are someone has done it. So if you find yourself stuck, definitely look it up. If you find yourself modularizing code, chances are someone else has done it, and chances are collaboration has been done on it, and it's actually pretty good. That being said, even if something has been built once or twice or 10 times, it's still worth contributing to. Even if you write the same 5 lines of code, that little difference that you include, whether it's a different method name or a different method altogether, that's valuable. That's valuable to other people who are viewing this open source. So even if something has been built 5 or 10 or 20 times, don't hesitate to build it again. I just wanted to add that caveat. Why you'd consume open source, most of the time you do that when you find either you don't know how to do something or something's being done a lot in your project that you're developing. And so you might want to pull in an open source package to depend on that code that maybe you didn't understand, or so that you don't have to repeat a bunch of code in your project. Now you might be contributing to open source. So the digital world, like I mentioned, is effectively powered by open source. You can do this. Why would you do this? You can do this out of the goodness of your heart, or because the trust in the community, or you want to share it, or you want to learn with someone. You can do this for a whole slew of reasons. But just remember that you will never know who finds it valuable. I can't emphasize enough how many random packages I've found myself looking at, and I know that author had no idea that I would end up stumbling upon that package. So your unique perspective is valuable. I want to emphasize that. How do you contribute to open source? It's as simple as publishing a package on npm.js or pip. It doesn't take very long. It's quite easy, and it proves really rewarding. You can see other people using it. You can also just put your code on GitHub. So, or if you're not coding, like I mentioned, you can contribute to READMEs and documentation. You can contribute to issues. That's also contributing to open source. But yeah, the general path is you would push your code to some source control website, such as GitLab or GitHub, and then share it with friends, or just leave it up there, or actually go the length of publishing a package on NPM, a package manager, or Yarn, or pip, etc. The last step, of course, is building. And now you might be publishing your own packages, and that's awesome. That's a really, really big deal. I want to emphasize again, even if something's been built 1 time or 2 or 5 times, it is worth building again. I was talking to a friend recently, and I always use this anecdote when I talk about open source and kind of the iteration of just doing things that maybe already exist, but doing them again. And I said, think of a cookie. Imagine if the first caveman who created a cookie, and then someone else came along and said, I want to make a cookie, but you know what? I'm actually not going to make a cookie because someone else has already made the cookie. Well, imagine how few cookies we would have in the world today. And that just sounds like a really, really sad world to live in. There are so many cookies because so many chefs were like, a cookie's already been done, but I think I can do it just a little bit differently. And that little bit differently has turned into another whole cookie. And that is awesome. And the chef community loves them for it. It's similar to that in the tech community. So now you might be saying, if you're building open source projects and maintaining them and publishing them, you might be saying, whoa, I'm spending a lot of time on open source. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Maybe I'm burning out a little bit. There's actually tons of work that goes into open source from people all over the world. Tons of work for these packages that are really highly used. So you might be thinking that, and now I'm actually going to take a minute and introduce myself because I kind of skipped over this earlier, and we're going to switch gears a little bit. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry my camera wasn't working earlier. I am Joel. I studied computer science at school. I work on Google on their GCP product called BigQuery. And about a year ago, I created a company called FOSS, which is intended to help compensate open source developers. So in other words, we're trying to pay open source authors and maintainers. So yeah, FOSS. The next little bit, I'm going to talk about kind of my journey in open source, why we created FOSS, what it is, how it works, why you all should definitely sign up for FOSS, and what we're trying to do with it. So FOSS, we're all about paying open source devs for doing what they love, which is open source. There are people all over the world, like I said, thousands and thousands of maintainers maintaining open source code, and they love it. So we want to pay them. We want to figure out a monetary system that is valuable to both the people giving the money as well as the end result is maintainers getting paid. One of our core philosophies is we think every time someone installs a package, the maintainer should get a little bit of money. Even if it was just a very small amount, 1/10 of a cent, then it would be valuable because things would add up. And the end goal of all of this is we believe that by introducing money into the system, into the open source ecosystem, the next million developers will want to contribute. Right now, the reasons to contribute are maybe to build your resume or just for fun or just to help out. But imagine how many developers would contribute to open source, contribute to the community that fuels technological progress. Imagine how many developers would contribute to that if money was in the picture, if you knew that you could get paid. So yeah, imagine if on each install, just 1/10 of a cent was given to the maintainer. So what if I told you that NPM last year, the JavaScript package manager, or one of them, had over 100 billion package installs in the past year? 100 billion. That's an insane amount of installs. People are using this code all the time. I probably install a new package every day. And if each install generated just 1/10 of a cent for the maintainer, that'd be $100 million a year, $100 million a year to the open source community, which would be a windfall. Effectively, how we thought about it was our world, whether we like it or not, revolves around money. Without money in the system, it felt almost like a zero-sum game. What it currently feels like is developers pay or donate to other open source developers, so it feels like everyone is just passing a dollar to their right, and everyone's just standing in a circle, and nobody wins in that game. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to introduce a revenue stream from outside the developer circle. So we introduced an advertising platform. What that means is that we thought, hey, when somebody's NPM installing, I'm sure some of you have NPM installed or pip installed, you realize that there's a bunch of text that comes after your NPM install, and it's going by really, really fast, and it's really hard to read it, and it doesn't really make much sense, but it's going by really fast. And then the install is over, and it takes about 5 seconds. And we thought about that, and we were like, well, what if we, instead of showing all that text that nobody can read, what if we hid that text and put an ad, and at the end of the install, we replaced it with the final text from the NPM install, and that was that. And then the revenue from that ad would then be paid to the authors and maintainers of the package you just installed. So that's kind of how we're trying to change the paradigm a little bit. So then you might ask, well, if each person is getting $1 or $10, each package, not person. If I do an NPM install package X, and the result of that was package X gets $1, then how do the maintainers of package X, maybe it's like 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 maintainers, how do each of them get a chunk of that $1 or $10? And so the way we thought about it, we wanted to do what was most fair. So there can be some algorithms that just say, hey, split it equally between, let's say I did npm install X. Some people would say, well, that whole dollar should just go to package X and they can do whatever they want with it. Because really the person was only installing package X. So that's one way. Another way we thought to do it is to just distribute it evenly between the parent and the child. Sorry, if there's a package X and package X has one dependent, then we would split the revenue between package X and their one dependency. And we thought, no, that actually doesn't sound right either. So what we finally settled on was, imagine if each package's dependency authors were sitting in the room with them. Like, let's say I wrote package X and I got $10, and I depend on 5 packages. So what if all the authors were sitting in the room with me? What would I do if somebody just came up and gave me a $10 bill? Well, I wouldn't keep it for myself, because then I would feel greedy and I would feel like I just cheated all these 5 people who I depend on, who I chose to depend on. So then we thought, okay, well, it's only logical that if I got $10, I would just split it evenly, because clearly I value these dependency authors. Otherwise, I wouldn't have used them. So I should split it evenly. It's impossible without them. And I would keep $2.50 or 25 cents, whatever. I would keep 1/4 or 1/5. I would keep the even split. And then they would have, so each of those authors, let's say they each got 20 cents. We each got 20 cents. So then they would take that 20 cents. And then we imagined, hey, they just got 20 cents. They also depend on 3 other developers. How would they split it up? Well, they'd split it up equally. So basically what we do is package dependencies are built in a tree fashion. So what we effectively do is we split the money up all the way down the tree, as if at each level, the parent and the children, the parent node and the leaf nodes, were in the same room, and they were looking around each other, and they're like, well, it's only logical to split this money. And then it goes to the child, and the child says, well, it's only logical to split this money. And it keeps going down, all the way down. And the reason we did this, because this means anyone's package all over the world can get compensated. A big issue we had going into this, a big issue currently, or ones who are getting donations currently. And we thought that doesn't seem right, because we don't think a maintainer should have to spend time working on marketing or self-promotion. We think they're busy enough. They probably have their own lives, and really they should just be getting compensated for doing the code that's being used. That's kind of it. So that's why we distribute it all the way down the tree. Effectively, we X, etc. So over time, to be clear, we're working on the maintainer portal right now. So no maintainers can currently sign up for FOSS Bank and get money out, but they're still accumulating money in our database. And in the next few months, we'll release our maintainer portal, so maintainers can just log in and decide how to get the money out of their account. An additional feature we added is oftentimes more than one maintainer works on an open source project. There could be one, but there could also be 5 or 10 maintainers. So one of the only features we have on our maintainer platform is the ability to split up the revenue by percentage to any other maintainer. So basically the idea that some people might not be the owners of the code, but they could be contributing a lot of issues or commenting on a lot of issues. And like I said, that's really valuable. And so maybe the owner of that package is like, I want to invite that person into our FOSS Bank org, and I want them to receive 50% of this package's revenue or whatever it is. And then that person would decide, oh, here's how I want to get my money. We're partnered with Open Collective right now. So somebody will be able to pull out their money through Open Collective, and we'll also introduce a few other methods as well to pull your money out. Here's a quick example of FOSSbank. And we're going to install it a little bit later, right before I do my open source contribution. I'm not sure which number contribution this will be for Hacktoberfest, but before we do that, we'll install FOSSbank. What you're seeing right here, it should start over in a second, is just a normal npm install. And then you're seeing our ad. So this is a FOSSbank ad. And the revenue that these ads, it just cycled right there. We show one ad per 5 seconds. Each ad. Oh, sorry guys, I think I'm echoing now. Oh no. Okay, I think I'm back to good. Anyways, each ad, the money generated from that ad will be smushed together into a pile. So we saw 2 ads during this npm install. The money will be piled together and then distributed to the authors and maintainers of the package that I just installed. So in this case, let me see the beginning of this demo again. I did a blanket install. So I didn't install a specific package. And what that means is that FOSSbank will look at the package JSON in this project, and it will use that to see which packages were installed, because you'll note in this command I ran, I just npm installed in general, not a top level package. Okay, so yeah, going forward, FOSSbank, we're working on the maintainer portal. We use React, we use Next.js. We have a Fastify API. We run a bunch of Lambdas. We have an Elastic Beanstalk instance in AWS. All of these things can be helped with, can be contributed to. We have a GitHub org that I think I shared in the beginning, the github.com/FOSSbank. So we have a few open source projects there, and we're hoping to pump out many more soon. Additionally to that, we're going to investigate a compensation protocol so that maintainers can do even less work to be compensated. So what I mean by that is we're kind of envisioning a future where it doesn't matter how many FOSSbanks exist in the world. It doesn't even matter if FOSSbank just disappears. We want to create a system where a package author and maintainer can write some spec or implement some spec, and money can just flow in to that endpoint, to just into a bank account. And the maintainer won't need to sign up for any platform or do anything. It'll just happen. So we're kind of envisioning a more bold future where open source authors and maintainers can be paid in a sustainable way, and from any number of revenue generating sources, with or without FOSSbank. Additionally, on FOSSbank's roadmap, we're going to wrap pip and probably brew, potentially. Right now, we only wrap npm and yarn, meaning if you do a pip install currently, if you install FOSSbank and then install pip, if you install FOSSbank and then run pip install something, you won't see an ad. So we haven't actually wrapped pip yet. That would be a great thing to contribute to if you're familiar with Python. We're kind of scoping out design. A big thing we also need help with is just designing in general, collaboration, designing. These are ideating. These are really important things, and feel free to reach out if you have any ideas. We're kind of doing this for the community, so any help from the community is deeply appreciated. Okay, so now we're on to Hacktoberfest. I'm going to do a quick open source contribution right after this. We can kind of follow along. I'll do it live. I'm going to also install FOSSbank real fast. One note about Hacktoberfest is to remember to be respectful of a maintainer's time. So when people are maintaining and building open source code, if their project is popular or dependent on by a lot of people, that maintainer's time is really precious. So you definitely don't want to add work for them. You might have seen that Hacktoberfest made a change to their terms and conditions that said projects have to opt in to participate in Hacktoberfest. That was because a lot of projects were getting pull requests that weren't really worthwhile. It was kind of just making more time for the maintainers. So make sure that you have the best interest of the project in mind. Be respectful of the maintainer's time. Yeah, I just want to make that quick note. Okay, so I'm actually done the presentation, and I'm going to move to the live coding. I'll come back here. How's everybody doing? Are we good? That was a lot. Okay, cool. Okay, well, I guess I'm already sharing my screen. So I'm going to take you to flossbank.com. Just going to show you around. Remember, flossbank.com, you don't have to sign up. You can if you want. Just know that we don't collect any data. We don't store any information. We basically just say, hey, do you want to donate monthly, or do you want to just see ads in your terminal for free? And that money goes to the packages you install. We kind of want to live in a world where every person, as they're learning to code, oftentimes when you're learning, you're using open source. So we kind of want to create a world where people who are learning open source also give back at the same time. So definitely don't hesitate to sign up. We just introduced the login with GitHub. So you can click on that and sign up really, really fast. Actually, I should have clicked the sign up button. So I'm going to sign up with GitHub. It's going to auto redirect me. So that was really fast. But it auto redirected me already because I was already logged in with GitHub. So logging in with GitHub is actually, and signing up with GitHub is really easy. The next step it's going to take you to is to choose your level of support. So like I said, you can either see ads in your terminal, which is free, which is what we recommend. We don't want developers to keep paying other developers. We want to introduce this new revenue source, and we're doing that through advertising the terminal. So I would definitely select that one. And then it's going to take you to a crucial part where you install it. If you are using OS X like a Mac, or if you're using Bash on Windows, then you would run this command. You can copy it here. If you're concerned about the source of this command, you're wondering what it's going to run on your computer, why, of course, the code is open source. So you can inspect, other people have inspected. That's the beauty of open source, is that if we didn't open source this piece of code, somebody might wonder, hey, why is this person having me install something on my machine? I'm kind of worried. I'm worried about the security of that. And we would agree. So open source code makes everything more transparent, and it actually makes it more secure because so many people can look at it. Anybody can look at it. So I'm going to copy this because I'm on a Mac, and I'm going to go to my terminal. Open a new terminal, just the heck of it. And I'm going to paste the command that I copied. So remember, I just copied this command right here. It's saying, welcome to FOSSbank. I have to press any command to continue. And I should actually add a little bit of context of why you're installing a CLI. So FOSSbank has a CLI, and what it does is it wraps, oh, got a little issue there. Unsure if I'm going to get this to work. That's so funny. Unfortunately, I broke this on my machine a little bit earlier. So possible I won't be able to show you right here. But just take my word for it. The installation would finish correctly on yours. You would click I've finished installing. And then you could test it out by saying npm install standard. Now remember, you have to have npm installed to actually do this. Like you have to have npm on your machine. So if you don't, you wouldn't be able to run this yet. But I would definitely recommend using npm, using Node to develop. And then when you are, you'll notice that FOSSbank kicks in. Once you do this, you should see an ad in your terminal. We have a little look here in the how it works page. So if you go to the how it works, you can see to like make this is how it should look. So if it's not doing that, then something is wrong. But then I'll go to the dashboard. So then what we have here, we have just a pretty basic dashboard. We don't want to make a social media or have people spend a bunch of time on this thing. This is supposed to be really, really simple. It's supposed to be just a way where you can manage your donation. So you can see that I've chosen to see ads, and I'm making no monthly donation. I might change that a little bit because I really care about open source. You can see that over time, I've installed 1,300 unique packages, but I've only ran npm install 24 times since I installed this. So that means that each install, it's really amazing. What we wanted to show the world in your dashboard is that it's really incredible how few installs you can do, but how many packages you're actually pulling into your system, because each package has dependencies, which have dependencies, which have dependencies. And we wanted to show the most installed packages to bring awareness to the fact that I've never typed npm install JS tokens, never in my life. I didn't even know that package existed. And yet it's on my top installed packages. And that's so cool, because what we're trying to bring awareness to is that there could be these very deep packages in the tree. Remember the tree I showed you? There could be these very deep packages that people aren't even aware that they install so many times through just the daily work they do. So that's what we wanted to bring awareness to. Soon we're going to introduce a feature where you can just click on any of these top 10 and easily just send them a donation specifically. If you're like, wow, I had no idea that I used Chalk or Is Path CWD so much. I've never even heard of those. I want to send them like a quick donation. Of course, on the theme of transparency, you can download your data at any time. This is all the data that we have of you. It's just what package manager you ran, so npm or yarn, and how many times the package was installed. That's literally all we keep. So we need to be able to associate your donation to figure out where it would be distributed. So we keep track of the user ID and packages, and that's kind of it. So you can download your data at any time based on the theme of transparency. We want to be as transparent as possible. Okay, cool. So that's FlossBank. Now I'm going to make a quick PR. I'm actually going to make a PR so I'll go to github.com first. When I'm doing open source, I always just dive right into GitHub. Their activity page is pretty cool. You can follow other people and see what they're starring or what they're working on. It's kind of cool. First started following. Oh, that's interesting. I should check them out. So I'm actually going to search for, oh, that's the first one. I guess I recently searched it. So I'm going to go to the Teacher Fund next repository. And Teacher Fund is another website I run. It's a nonprofit that was mentioned earlier. It's written in React and it uses next.js as well as a few other technologies that might be worth digging into. So this is the website. It's called theteacherfund.com. Pretty cool website, fun to build. Actually, worth noting that a random person who started submitting pull requests to the Teacher Fund, we actually ended up hiring them for FlossBank, and we would have never met them if it wasn't for contributing to open source. It kind of connected us, and she's just an incredible engineer, and now we're actually working together on FlossBank, which is really, really cool. So that's another thing that can come from just getting involved in open source. So anyway, this is the UI. This is the code that we're going to be editing. Is this website? So this is the repository. Like I said, you spend your most time in issues, pull requests, or code. If you want to make a Hacktoberfest contribution, the first thing you're going to want to do is visit the Issues tab. So if you want to make a change to a repository, the first thing you need to do is figure out if there's an issue for it, and if there isn't, then to create one. You want to let somebody know that you're working on a part of the code, because communication is so key in open source. You'll also find some projects have a contributing doc. If they have one, you should definitely click on it. You can click on the contributing doc, read about how excited we are for you to contribute. If we have any issues with the site, definitely open a bug or an issue log. And then down here, we have local development environment. This is kind of important to read if you're going to do an open source contribution to a project, to figure out what you actually need to get it up and running. I feel like I just changed this. Interesting. Okay, so in this case, we need to make sure we have node and npm. We need to fork this repository and clone it. And then we need to npm install the dependencies, and then create a local environment variable. and then start the website by running that locally. And there's actually, real quick, I'm gonna do. So to fork a project, what that means is you're basically gonna copy it into your own GitHub user account, so that's the only way to submit a PR into an open source project that you don't own. So I don't own this one. It's owned by the Teacher Fund org. So I have to fork it to make a PR. So I'm going to fork it into my personal account. Let's see. Okay, sorry. So I forked the Teacher Fund Next, this UI repository, into my personal account. So now it's in Joel Wass Teacher Fund. You can see that it's forked. It lets you know what project it was forked from. Now I can actually clone this code. I can pull it down to my computer locally. I'm going to use the SSH option to clone the code. So I can clone this code. Actually, put it here. And work on it as I please. I can maybe take Teacher Fund on a different path. I can change the background images. I can make it so it's not even a website. I can do whatever I want with it. This is my fork. It is owned by me, and I can modify. I can republish it. I can put it on another website tomorrow. That's kind of the beauty of open source is there's so much freedom. There's so much transparency, and there really is. It's free to use and free to use in whatever way you want. So I just cloned the project. I should make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so now I navigate into, let's make this a little bit bigger. Is that big enough? I hope that's big enough. Okay, so now we want to npm install. Remember that was on the contributing docs. This is just pulling in all the dependencies. So like I talked about, a project has so many dependencies that it actually takes multiple seconds to install. So this is the output that we're actually hiding with FOSSbank. And if FOSSbank was working, if I didn't break it, then we wouldn't see what we're seeing now. So remember what I told you earlier. This text it's so worthless because it's happening so fast. I don't even know what's happening. So what we did is we hid this and we put ads on top of it. And then when it's finished, when the npm install will be finished, we put the output back. So if there was any warnings or errors, you'd be able to look at it as soon as the install is finished. Okay, so now it's done. Now I want to look back at the contributing docs because I want to know what the next instruction was. Local development, install dependencies, create a local environment variable named env-local. So I don't know if you all are following along or if you want to follow along. I'm going to fix just one thing with the Teacher Fund UI. You all can submit PRs. You don't have to submit PRs. It'd be you can submit PRs anywhere. I encourage you all to be following along if it's not on my repository, with just any repository in general. You can fork anybody's repository on GitHub. So kind of the freedom is your imagination. So I'm going to create an env local, and it's telling me to put in the next public development into the file. So I'm adding that to the file. And as a matter of fact, there's one more thing you need to add to that file. Oh, well, I don't remember what it is. One second. Okay. Did I not open that code? That's odd. No folder open. What is happening? Sorry, all technical difficulties with doing things live. That's weird. I have all my file contents here. Oh, now it works. That was so bizarre. Sorry about that. Okay, so there was one thing I needed to add, which was a next public. No, that's not it. Well, I guess we'll see the error. We'll be able to reproduce it. So you'll see how it goes. Sometimes when you're doing open source development, you run into errors. Something isn't built appropriately, and you have to file an issue. So we actually had an issue. We should probably close it at this point, because I think it's almost done. Let me go back to the teacher fund one. Oh, not pull requests. We had an issue to create a kill switch for Stripe and the Magic Link API so that others can dev on it. What that means is we have these dependencies on these external APIs, and we basically want to make it so that anybody can contribute to the teacher fund and run it locally without having to have these secret keys for these other APIs. So you'll see I missed a piece. Okay, so things are running. Let's go to localhost 3000. See if it works. Okay, so I'm running this code locally. So let's make sure we're running this code locally. Let's go to the pages index. So the pages index is the splash page kind of the UI. I see that there's a hero image. You'll notice this is written in React. So you'll notice JSX if any of you are familiar with React. And here's a hero image, which is the component right here. I'm going to actually change this to say hello C. Okay, so clearly we're running our code because obviously this isn't live on the teacher fund. I just changed this. So now we have the power to change whatever we want. So there's actually a common issue with the code that we're actually trying to reduce. In all of our code, you'll notice that, or in most of it, I should say, you'll notice that we have this style of coding, these class names. If you look up the class name of NV1, you'll notice that I never define a class name of NV1. Oh, I should also make my text bigger. Maybe that's good. So you're wondering, what is NV1? Well, all of our styles in Teacher Fund use a library called tachyons. I think it's called tachyons. I actually don't know how it's pronounced. And this library, we load it from a CDN, and effectively you can add styling by just using props. So this one was a spacing prop. So MV1 is something that we can add to a class, and it adds the margin vertical 1. So actually an initiative we're using is, or we're executing on, is to remove all of our tachyons classes. We found that contributors find it confusing, so we want to make our code as readable as possible, so we're going to remove tachyons. So I'm just going to do that real quickly for a quick PR, and you all can see how it can be done, and also just watch the code. So in this case, I'm going to import a box. This is donation frequency. Do I want to edit donation frequency? I don't want to edit. Let's go to process card. Process card, I just am aware of this because I've been on the team for a while. This is the process card. You can see it's cut off a little bit. I think that's because I'm zoomed in on my browser. I'm not quite sure. But that could also be a bug. And if that's a bug, then I look forward to a fix. So in this case, I'm going to import box. Chakra. Oh, I think there it is. But you can, I just because of my experience working with Chakra UI, which is an open source library, and my experience with React, I just know how to replace these things. A box is a div. I can replace that with a box. Chakra doesn't use these kind of strings for styling. In Chakra, you can actually just pass styles as props, which I really, really like. You can pass an array of styles as a prop, and what that does is it sets the styles at different breakpoints. So the first value is setting it for all screens. So the margin, since it used to be, since the style I'm removing is NV1. I think I'm doing NV1. Oh, maybe NV1 is never there. Maybe I'm losing my mind. So width 25 large. This is saying this tachyons class, which you'd have to look up, which is pretty confusing, is saying that when we're on large screens, make the width 25%. So I'll keep that for here. The first breakpoint is all screens. And I saw that this is width 25 medium, meaning on medium screens, the width is 25% as well. For full screen, I don't actually see it, which means I'm assuming it's going to be maybe auto. I'll just leave it at auto. And then I'll remove these two classes. That doesn't look right. Oh, I wonder. Wow, Box changed it that much. What if I change this to Box? I'm going to try to find a relatively quick example. So I can say width equals 100% and remove this tachyon style, adding 3, padding top 3 on the medium, background card, H525, but we removed the width 100. So I could, this is part of the reason why we're removing tachyon styles, is it's actually really hard to remember what each of those classes do to put them on the box. So I could go further. I'm not going to for the sake of time. I really want to answer questions for you all. So I made a change. This was a really, really small change, but valuable nonetheless. And I can go back here. I can do git diff to see my change. Okay, I see my change there. I'm going to add small change, removing tachyon styles. Good enough message. Hit push origin production. Okay. Now, if I go back to my fork, that's not the fork. Sorry, here's my fork. If I go back to this fork, it should show me this branch is one commit ahead of teacher fund production, meaning my fork is one commit ahead of where I forked it from, which is teacher fund production. So it knows, GitHub knows automatically, and it's saying, hey, do you want to compare this code? Do you want to open a pull request? So I want to open pull request. I want to open my pull request for Hacktoberfest. This was a pretty small change. I didn't spend that much time on it. Probably should have done more, but I'll probably do more later. So this will be one of my Hacktoberfest changes. This is saying I want to create a pull request from my forked repository, branch production, to the remote repository, which is teacher funds, branch production. So I'm going to create the pull request. I'm going to add a message. Usually when you're creating a pull request somewhere, you want to add very explicit messaging. You want to be very detailed. Opening a pull request, you should change your branch to fix header or feature if it's a feature or a fix. I didn't do that. I was a little bit rushed and lazy. But definitely try to do that. Not the biggest deal in the world because it doesn't really matter, but it just, again, reduces kind of the stress and information overload on maintainers who are looking at your code. So it says when you finish making the changes, commit to your branch and open a pull request, reference an issue that you have solved. So remember I said whenever you're going to do work on an open source project, you want to open an issue or check the issue tracker. I knew that we had an issue already for moving the tachyon styles to the Chakra UI. But definitely check issues on all open source projects that you want to contribute to. It's really helpful to the maintainer. So I'm just going to say screenshots look the same. And when I'm submitting this PR, this is my local host, remember, I'm going to submit a screenshot to prove that it looks exactly the same to what it used to look like. And I know we still have this issue down here, but when you're opening pull requests, it's important, and you can upload an image by just dragging and dropping. I wonder where there it is. And it will upload the screenshot, and then I can create the pull request. So I've just created a pull request for a small change removing tachyon styles, pull request number 183 for teacher fund. And that was as easy as that. So we will see that pull request. I will get an email notification right now because I work on teacher fund saying, hey, somebody just submit a pull request. Go look at it. So I'll take my time. I'll look at this. I will comment Hacktoberfest approved in the comment, and then I'll merge it. Or sorry, in the label. I believe I have to add as a label. Maybe just Hacktoberfest. So if you submit a PR, I will do that. I will comment Hacktoberfest approved, or I forget where I put that. And then we'll review it. And potentially it will get merged, potentially not. But remember, even if something isn't merged, just the mere fact of contributing your thought process, contributing your time, commenting on the issue or opening an issue, that is extremely valuable, even if something doesn't get merged. So make sure to communicate a lot on open source repositories. Communication is key so that you're not let down or have misaligned expectations with maintainers. Usually people will welcome support and contributions, but definitely reach out to people, collaborate, communicate, open pull requests, and happy Hacktoberfest, everybody. That's the end of my talk. I am happy to take questions for any amount of time. Okay, unzip is required. I'm just looking at the chat. Unzip is required to install FOSSbank. How can I fix this in WSL? That, honestly, not sure. On WSL, I'm not sure. That's a great thing to open in our FOSSbank. Here, I'll actually share my screen again. You may have found a bug if unzip is required and unzip isn't common or something. So go to github.com/FOSSbank and open an issue for us. So if any of you all run into installation issues with FOSSbank, like, definitely let us know, and maybe you can help us fix it, or maybe we can help you get involved, or maybe you can just learn from it, or you don't have to look at it. You can do whatever you want, but definitely get involved. Open an issue if you find a bug, and we'll definitely try to resolve it or work with you, or open an issue if you think we can do something better even. Yeah, so my take on free/libre open source software and open source software. What do you support and why? What do I support and why? Yeah, that's a really good question. Free, for those of you that don't know, free/libre is kind of a more political approach to open source software. Free/libre kind of means that you shouldn't put a restricted license on it. It really means like anybody can use it for anything. And open source software is much like free/libre open source software, but it's a little bit less political, and people can add licenses, and they can say, hey, everybody can look at this code, but they can't use it for a business. They can be more restrictive, but people would still call it open source because the code itself is open source. So there's kind of two different terms for open source. For all intents and purposes, when it comes to FOSSbank, we go with a more kind of relaxed version of open source. If it's viewable code, we kind of consider it open source, and we think that those maintainers should get compensated, even if that code might not be able to be used in some private corporation somewhere. NPM is in the process of introducing a payment system to make donations easier. How does this affect FOSSbank? So kind of like what I said, we're not in this to get rich. We don't want to make money. This is for the maintainer community. So we want we really want open source authors and maintainers to get paid. So if it turns out that somebody looks at FOSSBank and they're like, oh, that's an okay idea, but we can do that better, and it's somebody who works at NPM and they go build something at NPM that actually works really well and maintainers end up getting paid, that would be awesome. And I would gladly stop doing this, and I would go maintain some other open source code. So we're simply trying to solve a problem here, and I would love if other companies, especially NPM is amazing. If they invested time and made this a priority, that'd be really great. Why do big companies, sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. Why do big companies such as Google, Facebook, and Amazon invest a lot in open source? Doesn't that make their efforts non-profitable? Yeah, so I think they invest a lot in open source because companies realize that open source is vital to everything. I mean, everything within the digital community. You can, this is clear in the fact that if anybody is learning a new language or a new programming practice, chances are they're using open source code to do that. Everybody learns to code through open source. I learned through open source tutorials and by looking at open source libraries. So open source is crucial to the tech community. It's crucial to every single business. And so these big companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook, they are spending a lot of resources to give back to the open source community, as well as attract people who want to work on open source code, which they're quite successful at. Okay, I'll hang out for a few more minutes. I'm happy to take questions. Again, reach out whenever. I think I put my Twitter on my first slide. I don't know if you saw me. I'm sure you can find me, FOSSBank. Reach out. We would love any contributions, anything at all. Support, or even just talking about it. Even if you even just having the conversation of open source sustainability, that is a win for the community. So yeah, and again, thank you for having me. I'm really blessed to be here. So thank you so much. This was really fun. I think there's one more question. How about creating an extension in editors such as VS Code that pop out the number of lines and developers that gave that particular function? Just a random thought. Yeah, that'd be awesome. If somebody wants to create that, Pete founded FOSSBank with me. He actually works on VS Codium. I don't know if you've heard of VS Codium, but it's kind of a differently licensed VS Code, but it's the VS Code build. Anyways, I'm pretty sure VS Code is actually open source, so maybe you can actually make that contribution. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure for all of us to have Mr. Wasserman here with us. As we all know, we are going through a tough time through the COVID-19. Still, we are not stopping learning here. So we are so happy to be here right now, even though there has been so much difficulties for all of us to be here. And especially for Mr. Wasserman, considering all the 2 different time zone aspects and all. So thank you, sir, for being with us, introducing us to FOSSBank and the importance of being a part of the open source software cultures. It's been a great opening to all of us to know about the things around us. We are also expecting Mr. Wasserman's support for all our future endeavors too. And apart from that, the sessions on creating pull requests were very useful for the beginners to know how to create quality spam-free pull requests. I would also take this opportunity to thank all the participants who are crazy about Hacktoberfest. Do contribute with an aim to the development of the community rather than for mere goodies. You guys were really awesome during the entire session, and we are happy to hit a participant count of 100. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Wasserman. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.